Well, hey guys, and welcome back. It's another week and another episode of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This time around, it's the 4th episode, and it was otherwise titled Code Yellow. Now, Code Yellow is obviously a reference to Deke, obviously a reference to all the lemons all over the place when it comes to him making a genius out of himself, making a name for himself, and this entire new company that he's built up. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about over here, a lot of theory updates this week, some of which are based on the events of episode 4 and some others based on the trailer for episode 5. Now, I did keep an open mind last week when discussing theories, so I kinda offered an alternate theory for Coulson, other than the evil Coulson name that we've given him since the beginning of the season, even before that, like since the first trailer of the season dropped back in January. So I offered a theory in which he's one of the good guys, not necessarily acting like it, he's a mercenary after all, but nonetheless though, whatever he's doing it for a good reason. I mean, not necessarily all his objectives are good, but one of them is definitely about the greater good. I did even offer the idea that we might have been tricked by the trailer for episode 4, like he is not really injecting that stuff into Harold Simcoe, but he's rather trying to get it out of him, or trying to kill him because it is part of him. Also mentioned back then that it's possibly a mistake that he's going after Deke, like because Deke is an anomaly, he did think or was just under the impression that he's just like Harold Simcoe, some other guy infected by parasitic aliens. But alright though, let's get started with the events of this episode. So Deke has built one other framework. We know he did salvage a framework before, so that's obviously a reference to the premiere of Season 5, but also it's a reference to Season 4, the Agents of Hydra arc. Now this is Deke in love with Daisy, so you kind of expect him to have Daisy within, his version of the framework. This is also Deke, grandson to Fitz and Simmons, so quite smart, but also kind of stupid when it comes to building that version of Daisy. So yeah, it was kind of fantasy-like with a little bit of a touch of pornographic, I suppose.
What took you so long?
Sorry, sweetheart. Traffic was a bitch.
Deke.
Another thing about that scene is that the framework experience that Deke was going through over there was all about the interior of Kova's ship. So yeah, that's a total reference to episode 21 of season 5 when a bunch of them were on the ship and trying to fight their way out. The guy he fights in there, the Kree guy, that's basically the Reaper out of the Lighthouse. But anyway, though, Deke is woken up by a girlfriend to be more precise, and the girlfriend is portrayed by Marissa Tancarone, the producer of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She gives us a solid and fun portrayal of the character, a little bit of a Kardashian vibe in the process, but nonetheless, a very funny portrayal of the character. We get the thing about the Baba from the synopsis, and apparently the Baba is bubble tea, as I did state on my synopsis breakdown, only it's not Deke who wanted the bubble tea, it's his girlfriend. It's Sequoia, the character portrayed by Marissa. Now, the choice of a girlfriend of an Asian descent with the name Sequoia, which is pretty similar to Sky, and Deke probably knows the history, that could be a total reference to his crush on Daisy as well. Like he's basically picked a girlfriend that in one way or the other reminds him of Daisy, even though not exactly like Daisy. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the lemons on the episode, the portraits and everything. My favorite was the one on the shirt, but nonetheless, I'm not going to talk about them. However, though, lemons are basically a reference to Season 5. That scene with Deke, Mac, and Coulson when they talk about his love for Daisy, when he talks about lemons and how they represent love.
Well, you guys are useless. It's lemons, then.
Come again.
Well, in my day, when you wanted to tell someone how you felt, you just save up your tokens, you buy a lemon, you leave it on their bunk, 'cause that's a thing here, right?
And then there was the time where he dropped actual lemons in Daisy's room in the Lighthouse and then blamed it on Fitz when she thought it was such a stupid prank.
It's like the universe keeps reminding me that I should never have come back from the future. Also, some creep put a bunch of lemons on my bed as some weird sort of prank.
Sounds like classic Fitz.
Now, I suppose to talk about a gravity belt technology that's all about using gravitonium and creating a belt that's basically anti-gravity, so you've basically got the obvious reference over here. I also love how that entire first scene, like the first 6 minutes of this episode, kind of ends like all of this was one big advert for Deke and his creations. But switching though to the Lighthouse, Agent May is running point on this, so make sure she knows, to which the response was, "Believe me, she's on it." Now, all of that kind of hints towards the obsession that she's got with Sarge, or Coulson, fake Coulson as they call him, regardless of what we got to know out of this episode, what we got to know out of the trailer of next week's episode, which I'm gonna discuss in detail. Sarge might have one good objective, but he's still got a ton of bad ones, and I'm gonna discuss why later on. But on another note though, there's that awkward moment between Keller and Mac. Loved how Mac handled it. Very adult, very mature of him. There's the yo-yo walking in moment, making it even more awkward. But there's also the fact that she talks about the sighting of fake Coulson, aka Sarge and Jacko, on last week's episode, the stinger of last week's episode, and there's her talk about making a map in the sky. Now, if there's anything that I can mention over here, it is exactly what I mentioned on my review of last week's episode. The map makers, the incursion-like event, or the possibility of an incursion-like event. The use of the name Fake Coulson reminds me of the fans, and I don't remember if it was actually used on the series as well, but how the fans called the fringe characters Fake Olivia Dunham, Fake this and Fake that. What makes it even fit more is the fact that this episode had a fringe feel to it, with totally damaged bodies like that of Harold Simcoe. I mean, we've seen our share of damaged bodies back in the day when we watched Fringe. But anyway though, the next thing that we get to watch over here is basically all about Coulson, and he's after Harold Simcoe. He gets Harold Simcoe, he kills Harold Simcoe, and apparently he does nothing to Harold Simcoe other than stab him. He's not really injecting anything into Simcoe, he's not the cause of whatever is happening to Simcoe. All he's doing over here is trying to stop whatever it is that took him for a host. But obviously though, and from what we're getting over here, the map making is not necessarily about an incursion event. I mean, the hint could still be there and it still could be a possibility, but nonetheless, it's not really about that this time around. It's about finding where those people are, the anomalies, the ones infected by these parasitic aliens. Now, one of my favorite moments on this episode is Coulson, buddy, that look on Sarge's face. That's me. I've laughed watching that scene on the trailer, I've laughed watching that scene on the episode, because yeah, there's that comedy that comes with Deke, there's that comedy that comes with Coulson, combine them together, and it's really amazing. But before I continue here, one thing about Deke's office, one thing about Deke himself throughout this episode, is he and his office gotta make a lot of references to previous seasons, especially season 5, because Deke is basically building this project of his, building this business of his, based on things that he knew out of the future, and things that he knew out of working with S.H.I.E.L.D. Now we've got Deke asking Coulson about how the team saved him. He still doesn't know, he's not really Coulson. He goes, oh dang, they gave you the S.H.I.E.L.D. memory wipe. Now that's basically a reference to the experience that Coulson went through, during Project Tahiti. Memory wipe of the death experience, memory wipe of the surgery experience, and then, implanted memories of more fun times in Tahiti. Going in order though and jumping back to S.H.I.E.L.D., Reno PD's first call was to S.H.I.E.L.D. Now that's obviously put in there to confirm that S.H.I.E.L.D. is fully legalized, fully back to working within the community, and most definitely fully operational in the light and out of the shadows. We do see more as well of May's emotional conflict. It's Coulson, he's not Coulson, we gotta call him something, not that. Now there's one final romantic moment, we're not gonna see another one after this one between Keller and Yo-Yo. The ley lines are mentioned once again on this episode. Seems like they're gonna be big this season. Seems like we're getting something huge when it comes to these ley lines. I'd remind you once again of all the talk about Cordco, all the talk about Edwin Cord, all the talk about the possibility that Coulson over here has been hired by someone who wants total destruction, total chaos, even though one of his objectives at this moment is quite the good objective. But I would also add to that all of this might have been inspired by Siobhan Haldane out of the comics, which in turn means that we're talking the comic book heroine known as Dark Angel. The thing though about tying ley lines to Dark Angel from the comics is basically all about circling back once again to demonic entities, in this case Mephisto. So yeah, we keep trying to ignore those kind of theories that Sarge has been resurrected, that there's a demonic entity at play, but every single time we try to ignore them, they kind of keep throwing us Easter eggs that kind of makes it sound more and more plausible. But you're not from here and you shouldn't be here. Real hand, not Coulson. That's the obvious reference to Coulson's prosthetic hand. That's a reveal as well, because now we know that this might not be our Coulson. Now there are two reasons I say might over here. This is quite the early reveal. If this is our Coulson and he's been raised by a demonic entity, I'd think that a demonic entity capable of resurrecting someone like Coulson would probably be able to grow out his hand rather than giving him a prosthetic one. But as of now, I'm sticking to that other theory that I've been talking about as of recently, which is basically alternate Coulson, however though resurrected. Now, I do love how Jacko, who does seem like more the muscle, is actually the smarter one, with that statement.
If you consider the infinite complexity of nature, maybe strange is the norm.
Now, obviously as well, when I presented the theory last week that Sarge over here is possibly going after the parasitic aliens rather than basically implanting them in people or targeting people to implant those parasitic aliens in, I was right to assume that Deke was mistakenly targeted because he is an anomaly just like those others with the parasitic aliens. Now that's basically confirmed by Jacko on this episode, like he's definitely not from here. We know that about Deke already, but he continues as well to mention that his body's signature is not the same as the others, and the others here are basically the hosts of those parasitic aliens. But moving on though, there's a bat-like creature within the body of Harold Simcoe. The bat creature is the parasite that they are after. The bat creature is the same kind of creature that we do see flocks of on that other place that Sarge and his team came from, in the footage out of episode 2. These are probably as well the same kind of bats that we did see come out of that portal that Jacko came through on the premiere of this season. Now I'm gonna go with calling them bats, but it does seem like they're pulling a little bit out of, SG-1, specifically over here, the wing gould. The way it goes as well into Keller's mouth kind of reminds us of the Tok'ra on SG-1, the way they pass the symbiotes through their mouths willingly, rather than the way the Gould did it, by attacking and going through the back of the neck. Now obviously S.H.I.E.L.D. had someone within Deke's company, very close to Deke, and obviously as well Deke using that wrist communication device to fool Sarge when it comes to his location. That's all about a callback and a reference to Natasha Romanoff using her cell phone in the same manner on Winter Soldier. But while we're at the subject of Black Widow, think of Deke the visionary, the guy who's about to become filthy rich out of his inventions. Think of him as, Tony Stark, and think of Agent Khan as Black Widow, babysitting Tony Stark throughout Iron Man 2. I mean, he's there. He's not feminine, he's not sexy, he's not a female at all to start with, but nonetheless, he's S.H.I.E.L.D. and he's not telling Deke that he is S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's basically babysitting him, monitoring him upon orders from the current Nick Fury, aka Alfonso McKenzie. But I gotta say though, who's gonna protect me? Is Daisy coming? That's not really about protection, but rather just about Daisy. Now, I do love the character of Snowflake or Butterfly or whatever you want to call her. I do love the fight between her and May. Do love the fact that May did smack her on the head with a phone. I mean, I don't remember where I've seen such a scene, but I do remember it was recent, and I do remember it was quite funny. Over here, not as funny, but nonetheless, it was quite funny back then. However though, I don't think that May would need such an object in order to beat someone down. So for some reason I think this series is establishing that Snowflake or Butterfly or whatever her name is pretty much a formidable foe. But May getting abducted, that's set up for the upcoming episode. That's also a reference to May just getting abducted. You've got May getting abducted on season 4, replaced by an LMD plugged into the framework. You've got May getting abducted at the end of season 4, sent to 2091. There was her abduction on season 2, once again impersonated by someone else, only this time not an LMD, but rather Agent 33. There was her abduction on season 1, during the episode tracks her abduction on season 3, when Guerra took the Zephyr along with the rest of the crew. So it kind of feels she's trying to break a record over here, like she's gotta get abducted at the very least one time per season. But we've got though another reference to tracks, the 13th episode out of season 1, Deke going crazy with the Icer. That's basically Fitz going crazy with the Icer when he shot the Cybertech guy several times on the train and left him in the box saying, "That's for Jemma." I guess the saying needs to change to like grandfather, like grandson. Now I seriously love the addition of Snowflake to this season. I think you're the most beautiful butterfly I've ever made. However though, Coulson does tell her to go easy, because not her, he doesn't want her dead. So yeah, this guy possibly 1 wants intel on S.H.I.E.L.D. or 2 just wants to find out what Coulson means. Who in the hell is that Coulson guy and why does the name ring a bell for him? Remember here that scene was on the recap of this episode at the very beginning of the episode. I don't know, but it rings a bell. So yeah, that's kinda gonna stick with us for a while going forward. Like that's definitely one solid proof that this guy used to be a Coulson. Be it our Coulson or some other Coulson, that's always gonna be there. He used to be a Coulson. But another favorite moment on this episode though is Jacko being led into the framework, pretty much trapped into the framework by Deke. Now if this scene with Deke and Fantasy Daisy was quite funny at the beginning of the episode, This other scene with Jacko and Daisy was 10 times as funny. Just the expression on Jacko's face was more than enough.
What took you so long?
The funnier part, of course, and I've tried to record this part like a million times because I keep laughing every time I remember it, is, when Mac kind of, figured out all about, fake Daisy or fantasy Daisy, and Deke was like,
2%. I'll give you 2% of this entire company to keep this between us.
But yeah, though, whatever happened to Keller at the end, Keller being dead, the fact that Yo-Yo had to do it herself, that was pretty touching, that was pretty emotional for her, for the audience. Keller's been around for such a short while, but the character has been interesting so far. However, though, to talk a verdict about how this episode operated, and before we talk the stinger of the episode, I love how they kind of mixed seriousness with comedy, and plugged the comedy with Deke right in the middle of the seriousness. That was amazing. I mean, I did love episode 3 of the season with all the comedy, all the getting high and whatnot, the gambling, Enoch, all of that. It was really good in my opinion, comedy-wise, but this one did it way better, and I gotta say that. So in terms of giving this episode a rating, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. The post-credits scene was amazing, it was pretty funny as well, the stinger of the episode. I did love it, it was different, it was new, that was interesting really. I know a lot of people are gonna hate on it, but nonetheless, it was interesting. And once again, all the Kardashian vibes. There's the Remorth Rumble, which is basically a reference to the Remorth Warriors from Season 5, but that also brings us to all the Easter eggs and all the references within the scenes in Deke's office at the very beginning, because I did talk about that earlier, all the tech, all the stuff, that's basically a reference to either other characters or previous seasons. The communication wrist device that Deke wears at the beginning of the episode, or that he gets at the beginning of the episode, that's a reference to the Matrix in 2091. We do see the food pallets in the general office area, the food pallets out of the Lighthouse out of 2091. There's also the prosthetic hand with the built-in energy shield, and I think the hoverboard used over here by one of Deke's employees is basically all about the Connick brothers, and we know that we're going to be seeing them, or at least one of them, at the very least once this season. But that having been said though, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Let me know if you did like it, let me know what you liked the most about it, and let me know what your theories are at this moment about Coulson and his team, or Sarge and his team that is. Please do consider as well all the factors out of the trailer of the season and out of previous episodes, like Daisy on the trailer telling May that the guy in there is not the man you'll love, like Coulson stating that, he doesn't know what Coulson means, but nonetheless, it does ring a bell. But finally though, you can let me know if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I post a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this video, and have a great day.